Hello there, everybody. Well, we just heard a story of Trapper Joe. So we've gone through 4 or 5 of the sportsmen that I grew up with, and even into my adult life. Some of the people that you haven't heard about. Like I said, there was always an influence of, different people that you never really went hunting with, learned anything from. You sat down and talked to occasionally and blah, blah, blah. One of them being Forrest Compton. Forrest ran a big farm in our neighborhood, and everybody hayed the fields with him. He was a very religious man, very good, kind-hearted man. And when you got the chance to sit down and talk to him, he told you about the property he owned that was in his family, which is basically the lower end of Mount Cobb for seemed like hundreds of years, because Forrest died recently, about 3 years ago. He was 97, I believe. So, he told us stories about fishing behind the old grist mill that his father owned, and told me stories about the mountain that he owned, the fields and the stream in front of it. There was a native trout stream. It's called the West Branch of the Pawpack Creek now. And then I don't remember what the name of it was he said then, but it was just a creek, the big swimming hole. There used to be a big beaver dam there, and a hole about, 15 foot deep. Man, you could catch some fish in there. Every now and then you'd hit one of them big native trout in there, 20, 25-inch rainbow or brookie. That was something. Big sandy beach, and it was in the middle of nowhere. You couldn't even see the hole. You could go down there and stay. Nobody even knew you were there. We used to camp a lot on that sand spit of a beach. That it was something. It was what a life to grow up in. But there was stories about that hole there and how it used to go off down through the field and over to Acker's property, and down in there's 2 big pyramid type structures that there used to be a water wheel that sat in the middle of. They used to irrigate everything. It was interesting. But Forrest used to have a pond in front of his house that he allowed people to hunt, or fish and swim in. I've caught many, many, many a bass out of that, and turtle and bullheads, and he was an interesting man to know. Another one was my Uncle Ted. He used to own a bait shop here in Mount Cobb, and he always told me stories of the old days of hunting with the single barrel shotguns and single barrel rifles, and hunting deer with a 22 because you didn't have anything else, and how they used to hunt down through the valley, and he told me different places behind his shed going up along the creek to go camping, to go fishing. Some of the best holes back there, because I was young at that time. We really didn't explore it. I did later on. Mount Cobb at the time when I grew up was, they were all hunters. Most of the guys that were there have been there all their life, and they were all hunters. The people that I knew, for the most part, were past their hunting prime, so they knew they had the stories. They remember hunting there. They just didn't hunt anymore. Another one would have been Bob Hoffman. Bob and his son Mark, we were good friends. We went to school together, and Bob was a different type. Very quiet man, moved very slow, talked very slowly, never said anything offensive about anybody. But he had stories of, they had a hunting cabin on the Susquehanna. They had a hunting cabin up at Strucka. It's a town in the middle of, almost in New York here. They had hunting cabins all over the place, down on the Delaware, hunting and fishing cabins, and they used to go every weekend. Him and his son would go, and that used to belong to a hunting club called Wynooska. And him and Mark would be over there hunting deer and fishing. And I met Bob one time down in the creek in front of our house, and we were sitting there talking one day, and I was fishing with the current. He was fishing against the current. And he said, "Why are you fishing like that?" I was like, "Well, because, you know," he said, "No, no, not for native trout." He said, "Always fish against the current." He said, "You throw up and let the worm drag into you, and that way all the silt and everything that's scaring them and the noise just washed down the creek away from you." So I finally got old enough to get over to this Wynooska Hunting Club, and I understood why Bob understood native trout so well. Because that's all they fished. They didn't go to stock creeks. This hunting club had a, what do they call that? Army Corps of Engineer dam on it. And where the dam let out the back was miles upon miles upon miles of native trout stream. And that's what they used to fish for trout. He never fished stockies. He'd go there. So he knew his ins and outs. And he knew his way around the woods, too. Then there was guys like my grandfather. I didn't hear many stories of, but my grandfather was an old woodsman from way back when. Let's see, who else in Mount Cobb was there? There was a lot of trappers. Oliver, he was a trapper, hunter. Whole family was. And they did most of their hunting and trapping in the wilds behind Hamlin area, which gets pretty wild. People don't realize that living there, but the terrain is very, very mountainous, northeastern Pennsylvania terrain. Rattlers, a lot of cats. You know, it was pretty wild terrain back in there. Who else was there around there? There was his name was Hoffman. I don't remember his last name, but when you come out of Mount Cobb, you turn down a route called 247. Going up at that time, there was nothing there but just a big mountain. The developments and stuff weren't there at the time. On the left-hand side of the road, there was a trailer on a foundation back in the woods up against the waterfalls. There was two brothers back in there. They were hermits. Their name was Hoffman. And all they did for a living was hunt and trap the Music Mountain area there. Jessup Mountain. And they'd be gone for days. But they lived in this little 50 by 10 trailer. Like I said, it was on a foundation. But they had no problem with you stopping by. They would show you, what they caught, what they hunted, and whatever. And they were a couple of interesting characters because they wore what they made. They wore what they could get, what people gave them. And that's where they made their living at. They made their living from furs, and they made their living from hunting. And excuse me. One day we went over, and the one brother was pretty sick, and he kind of disappeared. We don't know whatever happened to him. And then the one time we seen a bunch of cops there, we stopped in, and then you could smell the decomposition. The other brother had died in a chair in the parlor. But somebody knew it, because all their stuff was gone. All the old rifles, pistols, axes, knives, you name it. They had, antique stuff. Everything was gone except the bodies. Of course, at that time, nobody investigated because, hey, they were the hermits, The trailer got tore down and everything. Now there's some kind of car manufacturing place there. But like I said, everybody was, contributed something. There was like Dave Butler and Paul Schaefer, Rolly Myers. Rolly Myers owned a pond over in the back behind my house and about, I don't know, maybe 100 acres up on the mountain. And boy, I tell you what, man. My first 5-pounder came out of that pond. You could go over there and just catch fish constantly. But he'd always sit down and, talk to you and whatnot. Now, these people, I just knew them. I didn't know backgrounds of stuff. So one day I was walking down my trail behind my house, and here comes Rolly, just bouncing through the woods. And I looked and I said, "Mr. Myers, what are you doing back here?" And he's like, "Well, Tommy," he says, "I got, a little problem with the ticker, and, I take a walk every day." And Oh, you're walking through bear-infested wood. He said, yeah, so? No knife, no gun, no nothing. Pocket knife. These old woodmen, stuff like that didn't bother them. They didn't even carry canteens with them. They knew all the springs in the area to stop and get drinks at. Some of these guys showed me areas you could find springs, and I didn't even know it was there, and I've been exploring this place all my life. They're just like little runoff, you see. It was crazy. And turns out Rolly was a World War II vet. He won a Medal of Honor in World War II, and you would never know the man was so humble. But yeah, we hunted behind his place quite a few times, and then there was the Jones brothers. They were always in the woods, them kids, and the Kaisers and the Evanses and Simeons. Oh man, it was where I grew up in Mount Cobb. The stories and the people, it was an everyday thing. Like, people sat down to talk. They didn't talk about whether COVID-19 was killing off 3 billion people, whether it was a lie. It was nah. World politics, that was right after Vietnam, let's just say. World politics didn't matter, man. You sat down and you and your buddies, and you talked about fishing, and you talked about hunting, and knives, and guns, and when you're kids, you get, and you have this. Well, I want this 22, and I want that 22, and I want this, and I want. And you sit there for hours along the bank with doing nothing, and sometimes not even fishing, just sitting around swimming. But you sit there for hours just talking about when you get older, you're going to have a 30-06 with a 3-powered scope, and it didn't matter if it was a Remington or a Winchester, whatever, as long as it was a 30-06, oh no, I like my 30-30, and so on and so forth. And, I heard about this new bird. This is true. I heard about this new game we could hunt. What's that? Wild turkeys. What the hell's that? Oh, wild turkey, man. The forest used to be littered with these wild turkeys. Oh man, that big white turkey. We didn't know different. Big white turkeys in the woods. I never seen one. Oh no, they're black. Blah blah blah. 1978, me and my dad was on Archibald Mountain hunting squirrel. There was a turkey season. And I'm sitting on the top of this rock, and I hear this thing coming through the woods at me. It sounded like a pup. It sounded like a pup coming through the woods. And I'm looking at it, and all of a sudden this big black thing come out. And I'm looking, it's like, yeah, that's a turkey, but, the turkeys we always see were white. That's what we knew. So I'm looking, and I'm looking, and I'm looking, and this thing getting closer, and it's like, that is a turkey. It's turkey season. Boom. 1978. Dad comes running up. He said, "What did you shoot?" I said, "I think I shot a turkey." It's like, wow, that is a turkey. You haven't seen a turkey in 30 years. We hey, high fives, everything. We go out to the road, and we're traveling back down the road. He slams the brakes on. Almost puts me through the windshield. Jumps out of the car with his Mossberg 500. Throws 2 shells on the gun. Boom, boom. Had our second turkey. So we took them home. That was Thanksgiving and Christmas, and they were delicious. And then it seemed like for about 3 or 4 years after that, we'd always run into a flock. They just started stocking them in Pennsylvania at the time. Although they were around, finding it or getting a turkey was like far and few between. But yeah, that's the kind of life we grew up with here in Mount Cobb, and it's not only me, but anybody else that grew up there with me that watches this, they'll tell you the truth. It was a life spent running through the woods. We worked, we loved, we fished, we camped, we hunted, we fought a lot. And we did our party, and we did our fair share. But for the most part, nobody was really out to hurt each other. We just, we wanted to hunt, and we wanted to fish, and run through the woods, and camp, and have a good time in our life. I'm sorry to say that was 40 years ago, and what the world's turned into in 40 years is scary. When kids start worrying about at 13 years old whether the world's going to, go back in a civil war rather than worrying about their next fishing trip or camping trip, bushcrafting, not what I'm getting for Christmas, or am I going to get that pair of insulated boots or am I going to get that hunting or that gun, or am I going to get Medal of Honor or Death Warfare this year? So we grew up in a magical time. And most everybody that watches this, in the mid-50 age, they'll understand that too, because you probably grew up where you were in a magical time too. So this is the end of the series on Storytime. There are probably going to be other ones. I kind of like these stories. So I hope you guys enjoyed the series. I enjoyed bringing it to you. And, maybe make a magical time for your kids too. Or try. So this is Tom. I hope you appreciate your time and your patience. We'll see you guys on the next one.